And it's important that we look at those single-use plastics because those are the ones that are getting into the bloodstream, into the waterways, into our bodies the fastest, and have the biggest potential impact on our health.
Mr. Cosgrove, thank you so much for taking out the time to talk to stratnewsglobal.com.
It's a pleasure to be here, Nilanjana. Really appreciate it.
Now, in India, when we think of Earth Day, we think of a yearly call to action, of course, but also it is the token act is shutting off power for 1 hour in the evening. Now, I would like to know from you, how efficient has this movement really been over the years? And is it enough? I'm asking you that because you know that the UN climate chief has said that we have 2 years to save planet Earth. So is it enough what we're doing?
Well, I certainly don't think it's enough what we're doing collectively, unfortunately. But I do think all these efforts make a serious impact. And just to circle back to the beginning of Earth Day, as you say, it was 1970 that Earth Day started. It was an idea between a U.S. Senator, Gaylord Nelson, and a college student named Dennis Hayes, who decided that we needed to raise awareness and raise noise about the various issues. In this case, it was in the United States. The rivers were burning, the air was dirty, people were getting sick. There were a lot of environmental issues going on. And so ultimately what came out of it were 20 million people in the streets, the largest civil engagement in history. And it kicked off things like the Environmental Protection Agency in the US, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, all kinds of legislation that ultimately did improve many of those situations. And so it's now, moved from the 20 million people back in 1970 to around 1 billion people globally that take part in Earth Day in some way, shape, or form. So it's a lot of people, and it's growing, and it needs to be more, and the impact needs to be higher, not only on Earth Day, but every day around these issues for sure. But I think the important thing is that, like it happened back then, when people get involved and people raise their voices and say, look, this is an important issue, whether that is, as you mentioned, a day or even an hour in India, turning off the power or whatnot, all those things add up, and all those collective voices add up. And that's really the idea, is that the more we're talking about these issues in any way you want to activate for Earth Day. So, some people are marching, some people are doing demonstrations at colleges like they did in 1970. Some people are writing into their various political leaders and requesting change. It varies all over the world, and it varies by individual. And I think that's the important part, is that not only the day itself, but Earth Day and our organization, which is a year-round organization pushing for these kinds of things, it plays an important role in getting regular people out there. And I think that's the important part about Earth Day too, is that Earth Day is not just about activists. It's not just about people like Greta who are very important to the movement and have an impact, but it's also about just everybody, everyday people who are living their lives, who are saying, look, we got to do something about this. I'm seeing it, I'm noticing it. How can I play a part, however big or small? And that really depends on the individual. But that's what we're here to support, and what Earth Day is really all about at the end of the day.
Right. My only worry is it should not become only tokenism and no real action being taken. But, there are, of course, stories of hope. And for example, I was watching this on social media a while ago that, of course, this is an old story, but it resurfaced on social media for obvious reason. And that is a Danish broadcasting company actually installed elevated benches all over Copenhagen, and that was done to send out a message about rising sea levels. And the United Nations climate report has said that if steps are not being taken, if global warming continues, then by 2100, the sea levels are expected to rise by 1 meter. So I think that was a very interesting story. So you have a lot of initiatives which have been taken to basically evoke collective consciousness. And like you said, all of us have a role to play, all of us have something to do. How important would you say such initiatives are around the world?
I think they're crucial because I think it gets the public involved. It gets companies and governments aware that, the citizens, the consumers, both of those are thinking about these issues and want to see change. And what's happened over time is these technologies advance. People have continued to say, look, I want this. I want an electric car. I want clean power. I want these things to happen. And, it's not happening at the pace that we need to forestall some of the, impacts that we're going to see from the rise in temperatures, but it is having an impact. And we are seeing in many countries around the world a shift, and in some cases a decline in emissions. And so it's, it's happening. It's happening because people are demanding it. And in some cases it's happening because it's frankly good business. And so I think the more that these things are pushed, and the more people are saying, look, this is important, this continues to be important to me. As an individual, I don't know how to power my own house with solar, but I want that opportunity to exist so that if I choose to do that, it's there for me, at an affordable price. And more and more we're seeing that happen. And so I think you can't necessarily draw a direct line from, what you mentioned in Denmark, but you certainly can put those together to say, yeah, I think those things collectively are having an impact because enough people are saying this is important, and it's changing legislation, it's changing business practices, and moving the needle forward. So
right, 1970 was when you started, and in over half a century that has passed, a lot of things have changed. So I'm going to, broach a perhaps slightly uncomfortable question when it comes to the topic of global North versus global South. The global South still needs, still uses, fossil fuel, and there is carbon emission. It's not going away at the snap of a finger like that. How can one balance that? How can your organization help in that? Do you have any solutions for the global South?
Well, I think, as I think and as I assume many of your viewers know, the production of fossil fuel energy is primarily in the global North. The global North is producing the emissions, and the global South is feeling the effects disproportionately, and that's obviously a terrible situation and something that needs to be rectified. And so, the biggest way that we can create a balance around that is by moving away from fossil fuel production at the levels we're at for energy consumption, and moving faster towards renewables. That of course lowers the impacts of fossil fuel production globally. There are also a lot of programs, and we support these either through the UN or other organizations that are pushing for ways to more directly and financially support those initiatives in the global South, so that we can both clean up what's already been done and mitigate the impacts as we go forward. So we're absolutely supportive of those initiatives, through the UN and our partnerships there, and other organizations that we partner with. And it's vital. I mean, we have to find a solution that works globally, or it doesn't work at all. I mean, we're all, whether we're global North or global South, we're all in the same, all on the same planet, and ultimately breathing the same air and drinking the same water. And so if it affects one, it affects all. And I think that's generally what we have to think about with these solutions, is how do we make this work globally? Because otherwise it won't work, frankly.
Yeah, because you see, the reality is that when it comes to the global South, be it fast fashion, all the manufacturing units are here. So it's like, the global south, there's a lot of dumping happening, but at the same time, also the pressure that you have to do it, but at the same time, it started, as you said, it started in the global north. So how can this be handled? How can this balance? I think it's not a very easy question, because
It's
we
not an
are,
easy question. Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, it's a very complicated issue. And when you
yes,
mentioned fast fashion, that's an area that we've been focusing on with one of our campaigns in the last few years, for a couple of reasons. One, roughly, depending on the numbers you look at, 10% of emissions are from fast fashion in the
yeah,
fashion industry generally. And two, the waste created is absolutely enormous. And most consumers, most citizens really, it hasn't been something they've been aware of. And so what we're trying to do is raise awareness around these issues, that, the companies that are producing these things are really not thinking about the health of the planet, and they're not thinking about your health individually either. They're thinking about, how can I sell more clothes every week? The other issue around fashion that we're raising is that, somewhere upwards of 60 to 70% of all clothing that's produced is made out of plastic, which is made out of oil. So you've got the emissions issue, which I talked about, but then you also have the issue of, the health effects that are associated with plastics, and fast fashion is a major contributor to microplastics, nanoplastics that find their way into the water, into our air, potentially through our skin, and into our bodies directly. So there are numerous issues that we're trying to just bring awareness to as a first step, because there are so many people that just don't really understand the impacts. And then, again, many of those impacts are multiplied many times over as we go from the global north to the global south. So we're trying to put a spotlight on those issues. I'd love to tell you I have the perfect solution and how to solve it. We don't. We have some ideas and ways we can limit the impacts, and we certainly want to move away from a fashion cycle that's weekly to something that's a little more reasonable. But these are issues that I think the more people become aware of, the more the public becomes aware of. Much like things happen with renewable energy, that we can start to make some real impacts and change the course of these industries and change the course of the consumerism that's related to it.
In fact, talking about plastic, your theme this Earth Day is planet versus plastic, and you've called for a 60% reduction in the production of plastics by 2040. What is the plan of action? Do you have a broad plan in mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. If you look at the sort of trends currently, plastic production has been increasing at an incredible rate, so much so that by 2040, it's set to double currently. By 2060, it's set to triple in terms of global production of plastics. We're producing plastics at a rate that is unsustainable, and that is leading to all kinds of both upstream and downstream impacts and health impacts. And so we're looking at, as you say, a 60% reduction by 2040. So turning that around. We're not suggesting that we can get rid of all plastic production. That's very difficult to do, and there are certainly legitimate uses of plastics. But what we are trying to do is limit particularly single-use plastics. 50% of all the plastics produced today, and that'll be true in 2040 and in 2060, and it may be even more at current rates, are single-use plastics. So if we can push away from single-use plastics, and we're calling for an end to single-use by 2030, so a very aggressive time frame, we can get to that goal of 60 by 2040 quite easily if we focus on those areas. And it's important that we look at those single-use plastics, because those are the ones that are getting into the bloodstream, into the waterways, into our bodies the fastest, and have the biggest potential impact on our health, globally, the health of our family, the health of our pets, the health of really, every living being on this planet. And so here again, I think, raising awareness, getting people to understand these are the issues. This is an issue. Most people don't realize that plastics are a petroleum product. 99% of all plastics made are oil. You're wearing oil. When you're eating with a plastic fork, you're eating with oil. And most people don't realize that. And I think when they do, they start to think again about maybe I should think about that plastic use.
Maybe start carrying cloth bags.
Cloth bags are a great way to start, of course. Yeah.
Just that one thing makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Yes.
All these things can make a huge difference. Moving away from plastic bottles, both for your health and both for the pollution that it causes downstream as well. So we're really trying to raise awareness on that, and we're really trying to help people understand that. Well, I think many understand there's a plastic pollution problem. Not enough people really understand there's a significant and serious body of research now showing that there are immediate impacts to human health. There's a study that just came out last week from the New England Journal of Medicine that showed that the plaque inside those who have heart disease, who have had a stroke, who've died from heart disease, a large portion of it was microplastics. So the actual microplastics themselves were helping to
actually lodged in the arteries.
Actually lodged in the arteries, part of the blockage in the heart. So, there's that piece of it, the actual piece of it, and then there's the chemicals within it that are also causing things like endocrine disruption and other cancers and other things. So it's really important that people understand not only this is a plastic pollution issue, but this is a human health issue. This is a biodiversity health issue broadly. And we need to do something about it. It's a runaway production at this point that really needs to change.
Wow, I have so much to talk to you about. I wanted to talk to you about the gender impact. I wanted to talk to you about the climate impact gap between, again, Global South and Global North, but we're running out of time. So what I'm going to do is we're going to come back to you at a future date, and we're going to have a detailed discussion on this, because this is a topic I think a lot more needs to be done. We need to talk a lot more about this, and be it Earth Day, be it Environment Day, let's keep talking, let's keep making people aware. That's all we can do. Thank you so much, Mr. Cosgrove, for taking out the time to talk to us and for making us aware of these facts and what you plan, to make the world a slightly better place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nilanjan. I appreciate it. And as we like to say, let's make Earth Day every day.
Absolutely. Let's make Earth Day every day. Thank you. Bye-bye.